This is your urgent call to action. We are all called to lead in a world in chaos, crisis, and turmoil. Join a pivotal global movement for change to transform the leadership crisis worldwide. Will you play it safe, or will you wake up, step up, and speak out? Like Nelson Mandela did for South Africa and the world, we need a radical new way to think, act, and lead, leading boldly into the future. Join host Anne Pratt, a Harvard Fellow and multi-awarded businesswoman, and unlock the best version of yourself to revolutionize leadership with what the world needs now.
Greetings to all you future bold leaders. Thank you for joining us from around the world. My name is Anne Pratt. I'm formerly from South Africa, and I relocated abroad to attend a Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative Fellowship in beautiful Boston in the United States of America. Our thoughtful bold leader in this episode today is based in Dubai. She is a Harvard Kennedy School Edward Mason Fellow, an Obama Foundation Africa Emerging Leader, and is the founder of the Adaptive Leadership Foundation. She is also an accomplished diplomat and has served her country, Kenya, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and is currently serving in Dubai. Stay with us as she shares with us her adaptive leadership challenge and why moving fast in trying to tackle these tough, big challenges is often slow, and moving slow is often fast. How a childhood slap at age 7 in rural Kenya defined her career. The difference and the distinction between technical and adaptive leadership challenges, and how Mandela's lesson of separating oneself from one's role has empowered her career. We warmly welcome my dear friend and a co-creator of this global Mandela leadership movement for change, Mercy Atieno Odongo, and welcome to Leading Boldly into the Future. Mercy, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you here with us from Dubai. Thank you for spending time on your precious evening, and lovely to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Anne, for having me. It's a great honor to share my experience with you.
That's awesome. I just wanted to share with our audience that Mercy has spent 14 years in the Foreign Affairs Ministry for the Republic of Kenya. She was selected by the Obama Foundation for the inaugural class of 2018 as one of 200 emerging leaders in Africa. And she is a coach for transformational leadership in the 21st century for emerging leaders across the continent. Mercy, it's so wonderful to have you share your leadership wisdom and insights with us. And I thought a wonderful starting point would be to share some of your career highlights and what has brought you to this current moment.
Thank you very much, Anne, for the opportunity. Number one, as you said, my career has been spanning for 19 years of public service. That's correct. And then within this period, I was privileged to go to Harvard Kennedy School. During that period, as you know, I got to learn or get to some courses that were very fundamental in exercising leadership. So one of the two courses was exercising leadership politics of change and leadership from inside out. And the experience that I've acquired, I felt like it is honorable to pay forward for people who've not been privileged to get this idea. Because one of the things that stood out for me personally was the idea of adaptive challenges and technical fixes, technical challenges and adaptive challenges. So that work for me has been eye-opening. So when Harvard Executive Program partnered with us to help them shape the narrative again for the emerging leaders for Africa, to design a course for 21st century leaders for Africa. We did that in 2018 and 2019. We trained over 140 emerging leaders from Nigeria, the Gambia, Somalia, Egypt, Kenya, and some from the US. And it was an amazing experience. So that gave me the impetus that this idea needs to find space. And that is what led me now to the idea of creating a foundation for leadership to empower now young leaders across nations.
I mean, that's remarkable. And of course, we know that, Africa is a nation that is hungry for change and has enormous challenges too. I was wondering personally, Mercy, what have you found to be your greatest leadership challenge in your career? I mean, you spent 19 years, but 14 years in the Ministry, of Foreign Affairs. What in exercising leadership has been your greatest challenge during that time?
One of the greatest challenges that I still grapple with to date is my inability to frame issues that are transformational in a way that finds space with the authority figures to get the buy-in. And part of the challenge is when I frame issues, I come out as a very strong person. And that, to a greater extent, has been a challenge, as some would view it as a threat, others would view it as aggression. So to some extent, that has impacted on my ability to form alliances, build partnerships, and be able to rally around a cause that can bring impactful changes.
Can you share a practical example with us? I mean, do you have an example that comes to mind?
Interesting. I'll give you an example. When we were selected, as you said, from a pool of 10,000 applicants for the Obama Foundation, we are put in a group of 4 people. We were told to come up with ideas, right? So in the process of coming with ideas, our ideas were collated, 200 of us, then they were condensed to 40. Out of those 40, one of the idea that I had found space, and that is where the Adaptive Leadership Foundation comes in. The idea was to be able to bring change using data, because we realize that now there's a lot of misinformation and not basing decision based on facts. So we we were tasked to give the resource that you need, the kind of people that you need in your team. So I said I needed somebody who is good in resource mobilization. I needed somebody who is good in technology. I needed somebody who is good in branding, because I'm a strategy person. So those would form part of my team. So we were put with 4 of us in my team. And in the process, we were curating this idea. And one thing that was which I consider leadership failure is, yes, we went through the process, we presented our idea, but after that, we never became together. Why? Because maybe failure on my part to get the buy-in in seeing the sense of what we are doing, or it was too fast or rushy in trying to mobilize people to get in. And one of the lessons that I came out with, it's good to pace your issues step by step. Don't rush people. People are at different developmental stages. And sometimes when you push people too much, they tend to reject even the idea that would be. So it's good to get a buy-in. So you give people work, get the buy-in from the people right from the onset, so that it doesn't feel like it is Anne's or Mercy's idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what attracted you to move into foreign affairs? I mean, I know you did a bachelor degree in languages and literacy. I mean, what motivated you to move into foreign service?
Excellent. That is a long story, but I'll say it. What happened is, as a young girl of 7 years old in the rural part of Kenya growing up, on a Sunday morning, I was cleaning the house and we used to play. And then my brother, as I was cleaning the house, my brother pushed me and I fell down. I broke my teeth, part of my teeth. And on waking up, I slapped my brother so hard. And when I slapped him, he started to nosebleed. And my mom, when he came to the scene, I saw tears coming from her eyes. So I felt pain through the blood of my brother and the tears from my mother's tears. And within that short duration of time, my world came to a standstill. I receded in a corner and I prayed to God and I told God, if you get me out of this, I will never, ever fight or lay hand on somebody. And my world was shifted. I think God shifted my world to the extent that I don't fight, I don't like conflict. And I began to now pay attention to the plights of people. So even in my home, I'm the mediator when people are having crisis. So as I grew up, then I realized that this is the path that probably I've been called to do, but based on that vulnerability that I went through of being in an uncertain situation and helplessness without hope. So that, to a greater extent, now began to show me how to solve problems without using physical confrontation or fight through non-conventional means. Then when I went to undergrad for the university, I joined the Model United Nations. Model United Nations. So Model United Nations, they follow the activities of the UN, but from the youth perspective. And I was the head delegate for France. That is the time when there was the Sustainable Development Summit that was coming to South Africa. Yeah. And so in the process of looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, that is when I discovered now that diplomacy was the thing for me. So from there, then I went to graduate school and enrolled in the Institute of Diplomacy and I did the diplomacy and international relations, and I joined Foreign Service, and I've never looked back.
Wonderful. And what excites you most about Foreign Service and serving your country in Dubai? I mean, what is most exciting about that for you?
First, what fascinated me most was when Kofi Annan, the late, was the Secretary General of United Nations. And as a young girl, I would wake up, there was a program on CNN called Diplomatic License. And I would diligently wake up to watch Kofi Annan move from East Timor to Israel to Benghazi, name it. And I was like, this is very nice. And then I started paying attention now to world issues. So when I joined Foreign Affairs, it's almost like this is where I wanted to be for me. And now for my current role in Dubai, we are looking at issues of the consulate. Now we're dealing with the Kenyan people. There's a large group of people in Dubai, so we are dealing with issues of documentation, job creation, strategy for engagement bilaterally between Kenya and the UAE.
Yeah, that's very exciting, Mercy. How have you found that from a leadership point of view, dealing with, the desires and aspirations and the cultural aspects of what shaped you and influenced you, coming from Kenya and working in the Middle East? I mean, how has that been a challenge and how have you been able to navigate that?
It's very interesting. I came to the Middle East in 2019, and the most fascinating thing is, especially here, is given that the world has flattened, so the boundaries are broken. So because of the broken boundaries, we are having common global problems. When you have common global problems, it means now the challenges are shared, but we deal with them inwardly as countries or nation states. So what does that portend for us? It means that now even our diplomacy or our foreign policy orientation steps up in terms of advocating for multilateralism so that we rally convergence of ideas in solving common global problems. So it's very exciting because you can see, for example, from the pandemic of the COVID-19 pandemic, just one incident in Wuhan, China, and the world has come to a standstill. And our world now, we have to change. Now I can talk to you through Zoom, which is very easy. Sure. So technology to a greater extent has been accelerated.
That leads us into another, set of questions. I mean, if we think about the complexity and challenges of the world today, what are the kind of three big challenges that keep you awake at night from a leadership point of view?
Number one is the inequality, and inequality in various points. As you know, there are a number of people who are going hungry without food. There are people who are staying in refugee camps. There are children who are not going to school. There is a huge population that do not have access to healthcare. There are young African people, because of lack of employment, they're boarding boats crossing the Red Sea to come to Europe. So those myriad of complexities within the continent and even within the countries, for me, makes me restless. That is one. Number two, there's the issue of governance. The issue of governance and leadership. So you find most of our authority figures today are still using technical lenses to fix challenges that requires people to be adaptive. So it's a responsibility for authority figures to provide direction, to set norms. But because of the brokenness of the boundaries, agenda is set from even non-state actors. So it becomes really a challenge, even as authority figure, to be able to harness or even contain your people in providing those functionalities that I've laid before you. So I think this is one of the most trying times for leaders that now requires them to step back a little bit and see and be able to compartmentalize what are the issues that requires technical fix, how can we build alliances and partnership, what are the issues that requires people to change their behaviors, their values, their mindset, their attitudes, and then giving them that work of bringing that change that they want to see. And then the aspect of creating the enabling environment where innovation can thrive. And that means security, whether it's personal security, food security, all the securities to make people feel like they're safe, they are protected, they can innovate, they can grow and bring what they want to see.
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting with a multitude of complexity. And I guess one of the questions that come up in sharing, with you sharing a lot of these issues, what do you think is unique about this time, Mercy? I mean, the world has gone through a process of evolution. We've had these big challenges in the world before. What do you think is unique about this time, this moment?
What is unique about this moment is the acceleration of technology, which is disruptive. So that has changed a lot how people operate. And because the technology has intruded our space, or intrusion of technology, then even the personal touch of humanity has gone low, to the extent that even relationships are superficial. So that has impacted on exercising leadership with empathy, being able to extend love and compassion to people who deserve it, and even just acknowledging the humanity from a dignity perspective. So that is what is unique. So that, to some extent, because of the intrusion of technology and acceleration of it, then you can say that the love component has become low or diminishing, because everything is now in the digital space. Whether I want to transact money, communicate, do work, everything is in the digital space. So if we neglect the old aspects of our relations that have held us or glued us together, then it's going to be a challenge. And that's why you bear me witness that there are a lot of mental challenges that people are going through.
Of course. And of course, exacerbated by the pandemic and having to rely on technology and socially distance ourselves. But given this current moment, I mean, and these issues, and of course, the world of work has changed and the world of leadership is changing too. What do you think is the future of leadership?
I think the future of leadership for me is adaptive, exercising adaptive leadership. And what do I mean by exercising adaptive leadership? Being able as a leader, authority figure, to compartmentalize issues that require technical fix and issues that requires to be solved in adaptive way. That is changing people's behavior, attitudes, mindset, values, belief system, and giving people the work of bringing that change that they want to see. That for me is one. Number two, also exercising leadership with empathy. And that requires grounding on values, which now builds down to the idea of recognition of the dignity of humankind, and then the aspect of humility, to acknowledge the diversities of people, to acknowledge the stages of development that they are in, to acknowledge the challenges they are facing and the gaps that they are in. And then you see, how do we rally together to bridge the gap, to give hope, and to give them that enabling environment and ecosystem, that even in their vulnerable position, there's hope that there's a better tomorrow.
talking about one of our favorite mentors and icons. I mean, if we think of adaptive leadership and having core values that evoke our humanity, but also our humility, we both share a love and passion for Nelson Mandela, who we know was a great icon, not only for South Africa, but for the world. I know you've had a number of Mandela moments, but could you share with us what your big Mandela moment was? How did Madiba, as we call him in Africa, shape you or influence you or inspire you on your leadership journey? What was that moment and how did he shape that?
Yes, you said rightfully that I've had Mandela moments. The first one, growing up with a strict father, my father was very strict. And growing up as a young girl, in our house, rules were never expressly written, but they were implicit. So that now you needed to scan your environment and be watchful and alert to know that this is no, this is right. Why? Because my dad was a strict disciplinarian. How has that helped me in my Mandela moment? For me, that aspect of the strictness of my father and the scanning of the environment has enabled me, even in my exercising of leadership, to be able to scan the environment where I am, to constantly see things as they unfold, pick lessons that are relevant, failures, pitfalls that I need to avoid, and areas that I need to enhance. So when Mandela was in prison, one of the key things that he did that was very remarkable for me is he studied a lot.
Yes.
He studied a lot and he sucked in a lot.
In fact, they called Robben Island, the Robben Island University, not only for Madiba, but many of the other young prisoners that came onto the island.
Yes, but even while he was in the prison, he kept abreast of what was happening outside of the prison.
Yes.
And in that process, he also worked with people that they were in prison with, whether devise strategies to solve their problems, to represent them, and he was able to take stand. That is one of my Mandela moments. Another Mandela moment for me was, as you've seen, when you find yourself in a situation where you are unable to build alliances or partnerships, or because of your strong value system or your grounding, people tend not to agree with you, then either you find yourself, you either take a stand or you go with the crowd. And sometimes the stand that you take might not be appealing to majority. So it will be a lonely walk. And during this lonely walk, then you have to rely on the values that ground you. So for me, that also is a memorable moment, because Mandela, the bulk of his life, he led a lonely life.
That's true.
During that lonely period, he was able to acquire knowledge. I think he also understood the magnitude of the weight that he carried on behalf of South Africans and the hopes and the dreams that they had on him. And when he got out, he realized that for him to move forward, he had to forget and forgive. And he struggled, that reconciliation between the mind, as he says, and his heart. And that is what I constantly strive to do. Even where I'm offended, I try, in order not to carry the baggage of my oppressors or the offenders, then I have to forgive and say, for me to move on with what I want to do, which is the focus on the ball, then I have to forget the past. So it's something that I constantly learn. Yes.
Forgive the past, as opposed to forget. I mean, but the forgiveness was, as you rightly said, a big part of it. So in Madiba and his leadership, what really stands out for you as being unique about him, and why and how do you think that's relevant, given the challenges you outlined earlier? How's that relevant for today?
For Madiba, I will say three things. Number one, he was very bold and courageous.
Yeah.
And he took stand on issues that he believed in. To some extent, even he's quoted to have said, those are the things that even is prepared to die for, which I found very, very, very fascinating. To the extent that when he was asked about the issues of Fidel Castro and his affiliation with Muammar Gaddafi, he said, no, don't be twisted here. Your enemies are not my enemies. That for me was very profound. That in your
Yes.
engagement with the people, in your exercise of leadership, you have to identify what are the key issues that are aligned to the values you espouse. What are the values that these people bring to you and to the agenda that you're carrying, so that you don't begin to send away people because of the standards that you've been set for. So in another way, he set his own parameters of doing things. And in his invitation to the world, he invited people based on what he had said. So it's like he welcomed people in his space, yes, as opposed to fitting in other spaces and conforming. That for me is very profound. Another thing was his ability to reconcile.
Yes.
When he formed the Rainbow Nation. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of pressure from the Black South African who had hopes, and they felt like with Mandela's entry, that was their time to be liberated and feel free. And that was the turn of the other parties to be oppressed. But he said, no. We are going to form the Rainbow Nation. And it's going to start with him. That for me is a key ingredient that most leaders are lacking, especially in a process where an electoral system is a winner take it all. So it becomes like...
Are you talking about the issue of reconciliation or the fact that it started with himself, or both?
For him to start with himself, he had to reconcile. Himself. You have to first lead by example. You reconcile with your status for you to now go out and convince other people that this is the course that I'm taking. Because and that brings me to the second one of leading by example.
Of course.
You don't tell people to do things that you will not do. So you task people to do things that you will do. And those are my guiding principle. When I give people tasks, I don't give them something I cannot do. Myself, I start that, can I be able to do it? If I can't, then it will be improper to task somebody to do something that they cannot do, and you push them to their frontier of incompetence and you watch them to struggle. Then the third thing was the aspect of recognizing the dignity of humankind. Yeah. It did not relate with you based on your position or your role, but he viewed you as a person first. So for me, that is also very important in leadership, in the sense that he listened to views of people intensely, and then he responded. Meaning, as a leader, for you to be able to listen to the people, you have to believe in the value of that humanity, to even give them the audience to listen to what they're saying. And even if you are differing with them, you do it with dignity.
And what part of his leadership do you think would have most impact?
What we need to do today differently that Mandela did, and probably is one legacy that we carry along, other than that dignity, is the ability to take a stand and provide direction. Many people sit on the fence when they're expected to step up and give the direction or the guidance that is needed. So they waver. They don't have like a stand on something. For Mandela, he took a stand, even if it was uncomfortable with the people who are close to him. He would take a stand and say yes, in as much, and that is what I found very interesting. Even with his wife, I still don't understand when he said to Winnie that I love her, but up to this moment we will part ways. In as much as I still love her and she's the love of my life and stuff. But he said, because he looked at the big agenda and he realized that it would impact on how he's going to help drive the process forward. So that is one thing that people need to do today. There are issues that will push you to the corner, even to the people that you love. But how are you going to separate your role from self to move the process forward? Many people authority figures fall on the wayside because of inability to separate the role and the self.
Of course.
Yeah, so that one we need, that is one thing we need today.
So Mercy, can you share with us an example of where you've taken a stand in your current world of work and applied that lesson in taking a stand? And can you just share with us an example you have a difficult role, and it requires a lot of diplomacy, and that is the nature of your role. But is there an example where you've taken a stand that has been a lesson that you've learned and applied?
That's a very good question. And based on what I've told you, we take stands every day. If you're guided by values, if your moral act is value driven, then every decision you make, every step of the way, you take a stand on something. And sometimes it might not augur well, even in terms of your career trajectory. Because it means if you are able to speak truth to power in a way that does not augur well, or you are able to, driven by your value, inability to rally towards a cause, then chances are you are going to be relegated to periphery. Or when you come out as a very strong person, then it means where issues that requires some kind of not serious stance, then you are left outside. And that can be a lonely process.
Do you have a real example you can share with us?
I have a real example, the latest one. There is an organization that we are co-creating called the Global Peace Network. So we are trying to co-create finding solutions for world peace. It's a project within the organization. So what happened was we were doing what is called the 4D mapping, and we wanted to do something unconventional because the world peace has been elusive for a long time. So we were 7 of us. So the 4 of us were told we are going to do the presentation on behalf of the 19 people that we are working with. The first person introduced what 3D modeling is. Then I was to map the actors. And one of the issues that was a bit tough was we thought that the humanity, mankind, man, as an actor in terms of now the different segments of personalities within a conflict. So there are people who have been in the conflict epicenter. There are people who have been privileged to conflict. There are people who have been involved in conflict through mediation. There are people who are funding conflicts. Okay? And then there is conflict itself. And then there are people who are hell-bent to see conflict continue because that is how they run their business. So when we presented this conflict and said, let's look at it from the different perspectives. So we listed all the actors within a conflict. After we finished that, because of the idea that probably if you look at conflict with the human lens, because whether you take UN, you take government, you take resources, there are people behind these faces. So that did not go well with the certain segment of people. So when we are going to the next meeting of now actualizing, so we actualizing the 3D model, they decided to put me aside. So when we did now the mapping and all was in place, then we said, wait a minute. So where is the organization that we are finding? Because it was missing in the map and we've done everything else. So that is one example where when your ideas don't find place, or when people find your framing to be different from what they expect, they will not invite you to the table.
Can you share with us what you did in that instance?
What I did in that instance, one of the things that I've learned from my lessons and training of adaptive leadership, in that emotive moment, I don't act. I step back and internalize and try to analyze what is going on here. What are the group dynamics? What are the issues? What are people avoiding? So I let it go. So now when we met the second time, when now the team is presenting, then is when I spoke to the issues and it made sense. But had I forced myself into the preparatory process, probably it would not have been taken on board. One of the things that I'm learning is you have to pace the work, but you also have to meet people. You start from where people are.
So just have a bit of fun right now. I mean, just a couple of one-liners, just a brief one-line answer. Tell us, what was your favorite city or country? What is it and why?
You'll be amazed that my favorite city is Nairobi, Kenya.
Yeah.
And why? Because I have sentimental attachment to it, having lived there and grown there. And 2, because of the Nairobi means cool waters. It's a Maasai word that means cool water.
Okay.
And then it's also the city in the sun. So imagine if you have the sun and water, the
Yes.
growth, the innovation, the opportunity that exists with those two. So that's for me. And then another thing, Nairobi is the only city probably in the world, I stand corrected, that has a national park within the city center.
Wow.
Where you can see the big five, and then you can have breakfast
In the
with
city
giraffes.
center.
You can have breakfast with giraffes in the morning. You don't get that even in South Africa.
We don't. I have to
so
put that on my visiting list.
Please, that should be on your bucket list.
So what is your favorite childhood memory?
My favorite childhood memory was on Saturdays, the Sabbath, because that was the day. First of all, you wake up to the smell of chapati. My favorite food is chapati. I don't know whether you know chapati.
I don't. What is it?
Chapati is a kind of, it's made of wheat flour, but it's very nice. Probably when you come, it's not like cake, but it's sort of like bread, but made of wheat flour, round shape.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
So on Saturdays, I told you my parents were very strict, but on Saturday, you got away with many things. You were never punished. You woke up to the smell of chapati. We used to go to church on Saturday. So it was the Sabbath experience. That was my favorite childhood memory.
That's awesome. And we know you've dedicated your, you've spent 19 years in foreign affairs and the Foreign Affairs Ministry and in, serving your country. But what did you think you would be when you grew up?
Apparently, when I was a child, I thought I would be a doctor. So the doctor narrative changed based on that
medical doctor.
Yeah, medical doctor, treating people in the hospital. So one day I had a bout of malaria and I was taken to the hospital. And 3 things stood out for me and I realized, no. Remember I told you the sight of blood and tears. I got injection, so I cried. It was painful for me. During those days, they were using big needles, syringes to inject people. So it was painful. And of course, the smell of medicine in a hospital. So as we were getting into the entrance of the hospital, that sight alone makes me well.
Did it trigger back that memory that you had?
Yes, it did. Because when you're young and you walk into a hospital, as you wait to see the doctor, you'll hear the cries of babies being injected. You see people with syringes and like, oh, I'm going to be the next one. And sure, that day I was given injection and it was not fun. And I realized like, no, I need to find space somewhere else.
Wow. And what is your favorite book?
The Bible.
The Bible.
Mm-hmm. I've discovered that the Bible has solutions for every problem. That could be debatable. Mm-hmm. But even when you look at foreign policy matters or issues of international relations and you're able to relate them in the biblical, even with leadership and kings, if you read the book of Kings and how the kings and the mistakes they made, some of them you see them today and you're like, wow, these things were foretold.
I'm going to digress slightly. Why do you think we haven't learned those lessons and we keep on repeating them?
Why we haven't learned the lesson? Because we don't read them. We are looking for solutions outside there, but we have solutions within ourselves. And that is where the challenge is. And that is why, for me, adaptive leadership is key in the sense that it opens you to see things that are within yourself that are solutions to a problem you're looking for. Like, for example, I don't know whether you've heard of adjacent possible.
Yeah.
It gives you possibilities. And when you look at those possibilities, sometimes you realize that there are things that you step backward. There are things that you have, but either you've not seen them as of value, or you tend to sidestep them or ignore them because you're thinking that the grass is greener on the other side.
Of course.
I'm biased, maybe because of my love for God, but I've realized that most of the theories, the solutions are found there.
And to that point, what is your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is interesting. It's by an American poet. There's a lady called Ila Wheeler Wilcox. And she said that nothing can deter or hinder the firm resolve of a determined soul. Nothing can stop a soul that is determined to do something. And that has been my mantra going forward. When you believe in something and you are determined and you do what it takes, as Sheikh Maktoum says, impossible is possible.
Well, that reminds me of, when Mandela said it always seems impossible until it's done.
Precisely.
And what do you think Mandela would say? 3 things briefly he would say to our generation today.
To our generation, Mandela would say, be humble in your exercise of leadership, humility, lead with humility.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mandela would say, you have to have an opinion or take a stand on an issue.
Yeah.
And the third thing, I think Mandela would say to me that you must have a cause to fight for. Believe in something, take a stand, be courageous, be humble. Yes.
We know he loved children, and we know that he really missed seeing children in his 27 years in prison. What do you think he would say to our younger generation, to our rising young stars?
I think to the younger generation, education will be key. I think Mandela believed in education as a liberator of mind, so we tell them to pursue education at all costs. I think Mandela would tell the younger generation to listen and learn. To listen and learn, glean from the lessons. Remember, in his early childhood, he used to sit with his father in those meetings. And he would just listen and suck it in. So
his adopted father, the king of the English tribe, Young tribe.
Yes, he would listen and just suck it in. And then probably the third thing you would tell to the children, chart your own path.
Yeah. No, those are valuable lessons. So, Mercy, you're a remarkable woman who's had a fantastic career. 3 to 5 years, where do you see yourself?
That's a very interesting question. 3 to 5 years. Interesting. I'll put it at top foreign policy expert for government.
Top foreign policy. And ultimately, if we had no time frame on that, where do you see yourself?
I see myself with Antonio Guterres' job.
To achieve what goal?
To bridge the things that give me sleepless night, reduce inequality, buttress fairness, come up with strategies to increase enrollment in schools. The sustainable development goals. The challenge that we have, Anne, is we've been setting goals, and when we are almost at the tail end, we revise them again. So we started with Agenda 21. You remember Agenda 21 with Kofi Annan? Then we came up with Millennium Development Goals, 8 of them. Then we decided Millennium Development Goals are not sufficient, so we came up with 17 sustainable goals. I don't know what will happen after, but when we were doing the Agenda 2063, which is the blueprint for the African continent, we also came up with flagship projects, which are also on course. And we were envisioning a continent that is at peace with itself, being able to feed itself, being able to connect and trade among itself. And we have those African Continental Free Trade Area. We dreamed of silencing the guns. We dreamed of providing electricity to all the countries, connectivity. And some of these processes are ongoing, which is encouraging. They could not be at maybe the pace that they were envisaged, but they're making remarkable moves. So I believe that with a different lens or a different perspective, then it would be, we are yet to see, because a lot is changing. Imagine where we were 2020 and where we are now. A lot has changed. I don't know what will happen in 3 to 5 years. I don't know what will happen in 20 years, because there are cars, people are going to the moon. Artificial intelligence is here with us. Robots are doing our work. Leadership is being disrupted upside down. So we just have to be focused and to be a step ahead and not lose the values that glue us together, of building relationship, human dignity, and friendships like these ones that we have. Things
Of
that
course.
makes us human.
Of
Things
course.
that makes
Of
us
course.
human.
No,
So
there's a one. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are wonderful takeaways. I just have one question. Do you think the United Nations is ready for you?
I don't know. Like Mandela said, now you take a stand and chart your paths. It's not whether they are ready for me, it's a question of what value can I add. I don't even have to get to that level if I can be able to add value where I am.
Yeah.
Where, you know, what I believe in is the small incremental credits from where I am. If I'm able to change the mindset of a group of people one at a time, for me, it's okay. I don't even have to be at the helm. Because there's a lot of influence with informal authority than formal authority.
Of course. Of course.
There's a lot of influence when you have informal authority because you have the leeway to play with many things. So for me, that becomes critical. Critical that it doesn't matter who I become or what I become, but can I be able to change a generation at a time?
Yeah, absolutely.
That for me is
And
more key.
if there's one thing you could go back and do differently, Mercy, in your own leadership journey. I mean, specifically, not, is there a specific thing that if you could go back and do differently, you would? What is that?
To engage more with authority figures and speak to power in a way that finds space that finds space to bring the desired change. You know, one of the things that I say that is interesting is because of the strictness of my father, that to some extent in my developmental process hindered my ability to negotiate with authority. So till I discovered that the waters that I'm carrying from my father's strictness, after giving it back to him, then now I'm more liberated. I can speak to truth to power. I can negotiate with authority. I can be part of the change that I want to see, which is liberating. And that for me, it's comforting in the sense that once you are grounded on your values, then regardless of where life takes you, you will stand the pressures of this world.
Yeah, I mean, that's very profound. And I mean, it takes me to another point that our life story is our leadership story, really, in a way. It's very interesting that you've drawn out this, you've noticed this relationship with your father and how you needed to liberate yourself from that to step into more of your leadership role and not be bound by authority.
It's liberating when you discover something that has been hindering you from doing things which you wish you had done earlier. Then that would have meant you'd have negotiated certain things much, much earlier at a younger age.
Of course.
And that would not have limited your ability to do certain things.
Yeah.
But that not an excuse that you're stuck, eh?
Yeah, well, I guess that's one of the benefits of experience and aging, that having some experience under our belt, it kind of helps us evolve and develop. Final 3 takeaways for our audience.
My 3 final takeaways is from Mandela's perspective, diversity management, respect other perspectives, diversity management. Number 2, inclusivity.
Yeah.
Inclusivity in representation. Number 3, I would talk about the idea of separating role from self. Role from self, very critical when you harness, and then being able to do the 3, what I call the 3 things that authority figures do: provide direction, set norms, protect people, and especially voices from below. And that is where that is missing. But as Mandela says, be humble. Humility is a virtue. Take a stand on issues, don't be a fence sitter. And recognize the dignity of humankind.
Of course.
In your engagement with them. Because one thing that I carry with me, even in my current work, when you make policies with the frames of vulnerability lenses, it changes how you structure those strategies, how you structure your intervention process, because you realize clearly that there's a lot of weight on you as authority figure to be able to decide somebody's fate, and that's what leaders do.
Of course.
That are able to either influence, shape, but also determine. So it's such an honor to be in that position that if you don't understand the magnitude of the wage, if you don't understand the times and seasons you're operating in, if you don't understand the needs from the lenses of the person you are deciding their fate, then chances are that you might not be the best in your execution of your role. And also being aware that you carry the aspirations, the hopes, the dreams of other people so that you don't drop the ball. So you keep focusing on the ball.
Yeah. Well, Mercy, my friend, it's been so wonderful talking to you today. And you certainly are a woman of courage, of humility, who takes a stand. I feel so blessed and privileged to share this conversation with you. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and wisdom with our audience out there. And I so look forward to us reconnecting again soon.
Thank you very much, Anne, for this opportunity. And I look forward to working closely with you and anything that you need in terms of exercising leadership, information. And we hope that we can do our best, however little, to make an impact for our generation. Because that is what we want to do.
And for our next, why is adaptive leadership so critical in the world today? Many or most have heard the term adapt or die. For some, it's the Hollywood fantasy of James Bond movies. For countless more, it's waking up to the harsh realities in this radically and rapidly changing world. It is difficult, daunting, and in fact, dangerous when change requires that you challenge people's current realities, their attitudes, their beliefs, and their norms. Most people fear extreme loss when you push for change, and the more they have, the more they will fear they will lose. And yet your very survival in life, in business, and in the world today depends on your ability to adapt and to exercise adaptive leadership, to step out of the familiar comfort zone and to challenge the realities, not only of others, but your own realities too. I met my good friend, Mercy Atieno Odongo, at Harvard Kennedy School on the Adaptive Leadership Program, with remarkable professors Ron Heifetz and Marty Linsky. Her stories, her insights, and her wisdom helps us expand on more of the adaptive leadership principles. Firstly, we bust some of the leadership myths. Contrary to popular opinion, leadership is not a position, it is not a title, and nor should it be confused with authority. Instead, leadership is a practice, it is action. We exercise leadership. Secondly, she helps us define adaptive leadership, or as Professor Ron Heifetz defines it, it is the practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and thrive. And lastly, she helps us draw the distinction between technical and adaptive challenges. So often people in powerful positions misdiagnose the problem and try and fix an adaptive challenge with a technical solution. What do I mean by that? Well, let me give you an example. When Nelson Mandela came out of prison in February 1990, if he had misdiagnosed and misanalyzed South Africa's transformation problem as being simply a technical problem, a problem of changing the old apartheid laws into a modern constitutional democracy, and had failed to diagnose and analyze the adaptive challenge, namely the challenge of changing the heads, the hearts, and souls of all South Africans, not only the majority of South Africans, but everybody, in changing their beliefs, their attitudes, and their norms, he would not have succeeded in helping mobilize the country to support and hold a prosperous and a peaceful first democratic election, which, by the way, was held on April the 27th, 1994. It took more than 4 years for Madiba to help effect that transition, not only the technical solution, but to help mobilize the people of South Africa, all South Africans, across multiple deep divides. So in summary, technical solutions do not solve adaptive challenges. And adaptive challenges, if unattended to, can and will disrupt the technical solutions. What is critical is to draw the distinction between the two. In the case of South Africa, we needed both. So until next time, remember that leading boldly is about making thoughtful, clear choices. And bold leadership is about taking bold action, just one small step at a time. One step for you, but together a giant step for humanity. So come back soon and take care and take thoughtful, bold action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leading Boldly into the Future. Please find links and connections mentioned in this show in our blog and never miss an episode by subscribing at anne-pratt.com. That's ANNE-PRATT.com. May these insights from inspiring industry leaders, remarkable disruptors, and courageous champions of change bring forth a brand new you, emboldened, empowered, and ready to inspire hope. Come back soon, share with your friends, sign up on anne-pratt.com and join our movement for change. Why? Because the world needs you to lead boldly too.